All right, today, can any of you tell me what is the difference between the pictures on the left and the pictures on the right? Go ahead and shout it out if you'd like. More color. Yep. So on the left side, you see vibrant colors. On the right side, you see simplification and diminishment of colors. Again, what do you see left and right? Color, followed by no color. We see back in 1844, there was a study showing how the materials of what things were made with woods and with different kind of components, special metals that were used, there was sometimes unintentional color that was produced, but with the different kind of materials that we use today, things have been simplified into grays and blacks and whites, and they are far more attractive to the eye as it stands today. Because as you see, which kind of lamp would you like to get? The left side, anybody? My wife said that. She's not here, but, I'll count for her. Versus the right side. It's okay if you like the right side. I like how the right side looks. I like the modern look, but, what you see is that there is a diminishment of color. There is an oversimplification of what is abstract or what is bountiful in beauty. There's a handful of posts here, but I'd like to read just a few of them. This comes from the Culture Critic. Aristotle, through lines, not color, says that the lines contain the soul and the meanings of an image, the essence of a thing in its form, what makes a chair, not a pile of wood. As he also states, a random distribution of the most attractive colors would not yield as much pleasure as a definite image without color. Later thinkers like Rousseau and Kant agreed, stating that the drawing of forms is what gives life to color. Color can only add charm to art, but has no bearing on aesthetic judgment because it's purely sensory. Last, so color in the Western mind represents chaos in form, represents order in rationality. Maybe that's why brands that want to be taken seriously choose muted storefronts, unlike a colorful bookshop with no such ambitions. So again, you look at these two stores. Are you more likely to go on to the right side with all the colors or the Apple store? It's okay. This is what our modern society has done. Minimalism takes it further. You look at the complex architecture on the left, and it's beautiful in essence, but you don't see it as much anymore. The modernists stripped all detail from architectural design. It was a kind of extreme rationalism that distilled everything to its basic form. As Adolf Loos raved, we have gone beyond ornament. We have achieved plain, undecorated simplicity. This is the key line. Color was primitive and must be purged along with everything else. Only form matters. When we see the minimalization in life, there's some charm to it because we have a sense of control. You take away the chaos of all that is around us because you have that little box of safety. What happens when we try to minimalize God in his creation? What happens when we try to remove our Creator from the equation? This is the kind of thing that we see today with our story with Absalom. Absalom builds himself up to be something absolutely great, and I'm going to show you where we've come to up to this point. Absalom builds himself as a beautiful man, as a potential king, as a potential judge who will achieve justice in a unique way, whereas David, the anointed king, seems inferior. All throughout Absalom's brief reign, there is no mention of God. God has been removed from the equation, and it looks glorious at first for Absalom, but quickly fades because of his actions and his quick downfall as well. We see in 2 Samuel 11, David chooses to pursue sin instead of the Lord. And in this process, he not only hurts himself, but he hurts his family. He hurts the nation of Israel, and he has immediate consequences followed by future consequences that create a rift within the nation as well as his family. David reaps the immediate consequences of sin, but received tremendous mercy as well. God chooses to forgive him, even though there were consequences that were attached afterward. Amnon, in chapter 13, Amnon followed his father's sexual sin, where he raped his sister, while Absalom follows his father's murderous sin, killing his brother Amnon in revenge. Absalom is brought back home after being in exile for 3 years and is reconciled without accountability for murdering his brother. Absalom masterfully steals the hearts of the people for 4 years and then stages a takeover of the kingdom. David flees, discovering more and more people abandoning him. And in this whole process, David first, he abandons God for the place of his desire. Amnon abandons God and what is right for the sake of his desire. Absalom abandons God for the sake of his desire. And we all fall into this trapping at some point, where our desires seem much more attractive than what is right. This is where, as imperfect as we may be, our perfected Savior invites us to come to him, broken but made whole in him. The title today that I'm following is "The Unchecked Sin That Is in Our Life Can Easily Become a Soul Killer." Last week we saw this idea where unchecked sin creates this desire to usurp what is right. That is exactly what Absalom did. This week we're seeing how all of our plans that seem right quickly fade and become destructive. The big idea is the only plan that matters is God's plan. To give you a little bit of an image how much distance is traveled at this point. Right here in Hebron, on the very bottom left, Absalom is coming from here where he's crowned king back up to Jerusalem. And as soon as the news is heard, David flees to about right here where the Mount of Olives is, goes to Bahurim, all the way to the Jordan River right here. We'll pick up in just a minute where he travels past that point. So a lot of distance is traveled within a few days. Actually, it's likely close to 1 day. 20 miles are traveled up mountains, down mountains, through rocky terrain, with about 2,000 men in tow. Not an easy trek. And where we left David, he was at the Mount of Olives, perhaps doing one last worship service where God was traditionally worshipped there. And as he goes down with the assurance that he has a friend who can go back into the town and spy and figure out how the great counsel of Ahithophel can be thwarted, the first person he sees is Ziba. Ziba is the servant of King Saul. After Saul passes away, Ziba takes over the land of King Saul, neglects his master, who is the grandson of Saul, Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth later receives that land again after receiving great mercy from David. So when we get to this section, there's little red flags that pop up. Verse 1 says, when David had gone a little beyond the summit of the Mount of Olives, Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, was waiting. Red flag number 1, why is he there? He was waiting there for him. He had 2 donkeys loaded with 200 loaves of bread, 100 clusters of raisins, 100 bunches of summer fruit, and a wineskin full of wine. The king, or David, asks, what are these for? I mean, it sounds like an obvious question. Clearly, they're for you. But why he stresses that is it's suspicious why he's there, particularly without Mephibosheth. Ziba replies, he dodges the question at first, saying, the donkeys are for the king's people to ride on, and the bread and the summer fruits are for the young men to eat, and the wine for those who have become exhausted in the wilderness. And where's Mephibosheth, Saul's grandson? The king asks him. He stayed in Jerusalem. Ziba replied, he said, today I will get back the kingdom of my grandfather Saul. In that case, the king told Ziba, I give you everything Mephibosheth owns. Ziba says, I bow before you. May I always be pleasing to you, my lord, the king. Picture that I chose here, it comes from, I suppose, the book/movie, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. In this scene right here, Edmund, one of the younger children of the 4 children, He's tempted with Turkish delight. Anybody like Turkish delight? I do. I saw online that people really hate Turkish delight, so I just want to make sure I'm not weird and the only one that like it. But he's tempted with Turkish delight. He's also tempted with hot chocolate. And as he's asked questions, he's promised more and more Turkish delight and hot chocolate if he provides the information and if he betrays his brothers and sisters. And to his chagrin, he enjoys all the treats at the expense of his brothers and sisters. Ziba here is very similar in a sense where he has already enjoyed the fruits of all the wealth, of all the power of owning Saul's lands, and that is quickly stripped from him by David and given to Mephibosheth, who seems like a weak candidate, who can't even use his feet or his legs. And the implication that comes is that Ziba is betraying his own master for the sake of receiving wealth. Ziba's first interaction is, he's brought before the king. And the king, when he's asking questions, there's no respect, there's no bowing respect, there's no deep reverence to the king. But what you see in verse 4, once he receives back his land, he says, I bow before you, and may I always be pleasing to you, my lord the king. Now there's respect because he's given what he wants. This first plan that comes up of man is that there is a common tendency to take advantage of the chaos of the moment. If you see chaos, if you see problems, if you see stress in somebody else, and you're able to worm your way in and say, I want that, and take advantage of somebody's distress, that is a common tactic people use to get what they want, to fulfill their desire. Ziba gets exactly what he wants, even if it's only short-lived. Shimei comes in next. As David comes to Bahurim, a man comes out of the village cursing him. It was Shimei, son of Gera, from the same clan as Saul's family. He threw stones at the king and the king's officers and all the mighty warriors who surrounded him. He said, get out of here, you murderer, you scoundrel. The words used are literally, you man of bloods. Or, as is used, you unjust murderer. Everything you did was absolutely wrong. You are a vile human being. The scoundrel phrase is man of worthlessness or man of Belial. It is the godless man, the unholy man. The phrases that are used are ironically true, but for the wrong reasons. The accusations were true back in 2 Samuel 11 and 12, when David kills a man, commits adultery, and hides his sin, and is far from God. But God forgave him, and David already is experiencing that mercy. But Shimei, for different reasons, is accusing David in a very unique way and trying to pronounce the judgment of the Lord on him. He goes on further. He shouts at David, the Lord is paying you back for all the bloodshed in Saul's clan. You stole his throne, and now the Lord has given it to your son Absalom. At last you will taste some of your own medicine, for you are a murderer. Wrong reasons. This is seeking justice however you please when it is convenient for you. Abishai does not like this, though. Abishai is one of the commanders. He's considered one of the great three, actually the head of the greatest of David's commanders. It is told that he has slain 300 people with his own spear. He's a mighty man, and he sees this, and he's like, I don't like this. He says, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Which is another way of just saying it would be better to just shut him up by cutting off his head. He says, let me go over and cut off his head. David replies, no. Who asked your opinion, you sons of Zeruiah? If the Lord has told him to curse me, who are you to stop him? This is similar to a situation with Jesus and his disciples when the people of Samaria told him Jesus and his disciples were not allowed to go through. In Luke 9:53 through 54, it says, but the people did not welcome him, Jesus, because he was heading for Jerusalem. When the disciples, James and John, saw this, they asked, Lord, do you want us to call fire down from heaven to destroy them? Pretty extreme reaction, right? This kind of plan is getting justice however you want particularly with violence, when something is inconvenient instead. There's a short interlude of reminding us of the plan that matters. David reorients the heart of his people, especially in times of crisis. This is faithfulness in the bad and the worse. David said to Abishai and all his servants, "My own son is trying to kill me. Doesn't this relative of Saul have even more reason to do so? Leave him alone and let him curse. For the Lord," right here, "for the Lord has told him to do it. And perhaps the Lord will see that I am being wronged and will bless me because of these curses today." So David and his men continued down the road, and Shimei kept pace with them on a nearby hillside, cursing and throwing stones and dirt at David. Mind you, again, this is about a group of 2,000 people. And it's just some one guy on the side of a hill chucking dirt and rocks at him. It looks kind of silly. But again, this is one man taking advantage of the chaos of the moment. The king and all who were with him grew weary along the way, so they rested when they reached the Jordan River. I think this is a sharp reminder of even as you are faithful, it doesn't mean you will be pulled out of a situation that is incredibly tough. Faithfulness is waiting on the Lord to see how he will uniquely move in a situation that is not only tough and stressful and distressing, but it is also seeing that there is a better thing to come in God's plan when we trust him. The pain did not get removed, but they carried on still. And they'll see the fruit later. We're going to rewind time just a little bit. The text is kind of jumping around in time. As David is fleeing and experiencing all of this hardship, Hushai, David's friend, comes back into the picture in verse 15. Meanwhile, as Absalom and all the army of Israel arrived in Jerusalem, accompanied by Ahithophel, when David's friend Hushai, the Archite, arrived, he went immediately to see Absalom. "Long live the king," he exclaimed. "Long live the king." Pay attention to this too. His words are masterful. This is doublespeak. This is another plan that a human can come up with to speak and earn the trust of those you know, while saying something that means something else at the same time. So doublespeak is deliberately euphemistic. You're trying to mean something else. It is deliberately ambiguous or obscure language. What does "long live the king" and "long live the king" mean? He doesn't say King Absalom. Who's the king here? Absalom says, "Is this the way that you treat your friend David? Why aren't you with him?" He says, "I am here because I belong to the man who is chosen by the Lord and by all the men of Israel." You see that? I belong to the man who is chosen. In Absalom's pride, he could say, "I'm that guy," because David's gone. But he's still loyal to David. Hushai continues, "And anyway, why shouldn't I serve you just as I was your father's advisor? Now I will be your advisor." Then Absalom turned to Ahithophel and asked, "What should I do next?" And I picture this scene kind of like in Finding Nemo. Right at the end of the movie, all these fish are trying to escape this aquarium in the dentist's office. They get into a bag after dirtying up the tank, and they're in the ocean, but they're still in bags. And they say, "What now?" I mean, Absalom came up with this great plan to usurp his father, and the first thing he says is, "I don't know what to do. What now?" I mean, part of the deed is done. He looks at Ahithophel, who right at the end of this verse, or this section, will say, "For every word Ahithophel spoke seemed as wise as though it came directly from the mouth of God." Ahithophel seemed like the right person to turn to, but here's the advice that's given. Ahithophel told him, "Go and sleep with your father's concubines, the 10 that were left to take care of the palace. For he has left them to look after the palace," he said. "Then all of Israel will know that you have insulted your father beyond hope of reconciliation, and they will throw their support to you." So they set up a tent on the palace where everyone could see it. And Absalom went in and had sex with his father's concubines. Awful. I don't think they actually saw the act, but they saw the tent and the implication. Everyone knew what he did. There's nothing pleasant about this scene. But what you could see here as well is that, again, Ahithophel is the grandfather of Bathsheba, who David committed this act of adultery with, who also David murdered the great son-in-law of. So this is a little bit of personal vendetta, and this is a plan to further isolate the relationship between David and Absalom. In the same spot where David viewed Bathsheba, so this act was done in the view of everyone. Absalom followed Ahithophel's advice just as David had done, and as it was said, for every word Ahithophel spoke seemed as wise as though it had come directly from the mouth of God. And Ahithophel's advice is foolish and smart at the same time. The foolishness is that this is absolutely against Torah or God's law. This would deserve the death penalty to view your father's nakedness, as is purported in the law. To have sex with your father's wives is an abomination. But this is endorsed. And this shows that this is the only person that the people can trust in because David is gone. But we'll see that this quickly backfires. This deed is done, as terrible as it is. And Ahithophel, after this is done, urges Absalom. He goes up to him and says, let me choose 12,000 men to start out after David tonight. And I will catch up with him while he is weary and discouraged. He and his troops will panic, and everyone will run away, and then I will kill only the king, and I will bring all the people back to you as a bride returns to her husband. After all, it is only one man's life that you seek. Then you will be at peace with all the people. And this plan seemed good to Absalom and all the elders of Israel. I find this scene very equivalent to how the Germans attacked Poland in World War II. In their blitzkrieg style, they would move in very quickly with a tremendous amount of force, conquer a nation very quickly, and bring them to their side. Very little violence was done because of the show of force. In this situation, as Ahithophel is suggesting, he is suggesting a psychological warfare with a great force, 12,000 to 2,000, is coming in after David. What would be done is that this great amount of numbers in the middle of the night would come after David while he is distraught and weary, forcing everyone to scatter save for David, and David would be the primary target, and the threat would be neutralized. It's brilliant advice. But if we remember David's prayer while he's fleeing, going up the mountains, after he hears about Ahithophel's betrayal, he prays for foolish advice. We see two different forms of foolish advice. The first was to make Absalom a pariah, followed by what we see here. Absalom should have taken this advice, but then he says, bring in Hushai the Archite. Why? This advice was perfect. But there's this little factor of, what about me? In one of my favorite movies, The Count of Monte Cristo. Anybody seen it? It's the newer one, at least. Okay. Well, in this scene, this man, Edmund, another Edmund, he is in prison for many years unjustly, is able to escape with this map that leads to this great treasure. He and one of his friends find this treasure, and they should have settled. They should have been fine. And they're celebrating this great success. But you see Edmund on the top there just pensive and thinking, it's not enough. I can't move on because I need my revenge. I can't move on because I need to make people suffer as I suffered too. And he wouldn't let it go. The rest of the movie is all about the revenge and how it didn't work. It was satisfying for a moment. For Absalom, it's his pride. He allows his pride to block potential success. So he brings in Hushai the Archite, saying, let's see what he thinks about this. When Hushai arrived, Absalom told him what Ahithophel said. You hear that? The entire plan is given to Hushai, the friend of David, detail for detail. Okay. Then he asks, what's your opinion? Should we follow Ahithophel's advice? If not, what do you suggest? He's got all the details. And he's able to first unravel the plan, moving the me to you. Ahithophel said, essentially, you don't have to worry about this threat. I'll take care of it. Instead, Hushai says, you know the danger. You need to do this. Hushai says, this time, Ahithophel has made a mistake. First time, perhaps. You know that your father and his men are mighty warriors. It's reframed. They don't seem weak and weary. Right now, they are enraged as a mother bear who has been robbed of her cubs. And remember that your father is an experienced man of war. He won't be spending the night among his troops. He has probably already hidden himself in some pit or cave. And when he comes out and attacks and a few of your men fall, they will be in panic among your troops. Not David. They will be in panic. He's sowing fear into this situation. And the word will spread to Absalom's men that they are being slaughtered. Then even the bravest soldiers, though they have the heart of a lion, will be paralyzed with fear, for all of Israel knows what a mighty warrior your father is and how courageous his men are. I recommend that you mobilize the entire army of Israel. He's buying time, bringing everybody together. Bringing them as far as Dan in the north and Beersheba in the south. That way you will have an army as numerous as the sand on the seashore. And I advise that you personally lead the troops. When we find David, we'll fall on him like dew that falls on the ground. Then neither he nor any of his men will be left alive. And if David were to escape into some town, you will have all Israel there at your command. Then we will take ropes and drag the walls of the town into the nearest valley until every stone is torn down. What's the difference of the plans? Brilliant plan from Ahithophel. Simple, straightforward, precise, not convoluted. Versus Hushai's plan, it's elaborate. Bring everybody, involve everybody, and you, particularly the new king, should get all the glory, shouldn't you? You should go be at the front of the battle. This should be foolish advice. But here's what happens. Then Absalom and all the men of Israel said, Hushai's advice is better than Ahithophel. Why? Because it involves me, the king. He's looking at the potential power and the glory of the moment. What we'll see is the glory is short-lived in the next couple chapters. And the best plan is listed here. For the Lord has determined to defeat the counsel of Ahithophel, which really was the better plan, so that he could bring disaster on Absalom. We see these two different things in play here of God's sovereignty and man's responsibility. The man's responsibility portion is trying to purport that we may have all the plans that we want. We are held responsible for them, but the better plan is still God's sovereignty, which will not be thwarted. And we cannot understand it because of our finite minds. But they both work in tandem as we see that God is leading us best, and as we resist, we're not going to fall outside of his plan, but we are still doing the wrong thing as we resist. The bottom portion here says, our finite mind cannot grasp how God is sovereign, yet holds man responsible for his choices and actions. From God's viewpoint and plan, these two truths work in harmony. So we'll see these plans as they're all coming together. Hushai told Zadok, the priest, and Abiathar what Ahithophel had said to Absalom and the elders of Israel, and what he himself had advised instead. He says, quick, he told them, find David and urge him not to stay at the shallows of the Jordan River tonight. We must go across at once into the wilderness beyond, otherwise he will die and his entire army with him. He doesn't know if Absalom will follow Hushai's plan or Ahithophel's plan, but he knows both plans, shares it with his priest. And what they do is they send a servant girl to these two boys, Jonathan and Ahimaaz, who are staying at En-Rogel, ironically called the Well of the Spy. So as not to be seen entering and leaving the city, arrangements had been made for a servant girl to bring them a message. they were to take to King David. But a boy spotted them at Enrogel, and he told Absalom about it. So they quickly escaped to Bahurim. If you remember, Bahurim is where Shimei is from. Not exactly the most friendly town. But they find a man who hides them inside of a well in the courtyard. The man's wife puts a cloth over the top of the well, scatters grain on it to dry in the sun so no one suspects where they were. When Absalom's men arrived, they asked her, "Have you seen Ahimaaz and Jonathan?" The woman replied, "They were here, but they crossed over the brook." Absalom's men looked for them without success and returned to Jerusalem. Then the two men crawled out of the well and hurried to King David, saying, "Quick," they told him, "cross the Jordan tonight." And they told him how Ahithophel had advised that he be captured and killed. So David and all the people with him went across the Jordan River during the night, and they were all on the other side of the bank before dawn. Ahithophel realized that his advice had not been followed. He saddled his donkey, went to his hometown, set his affairs in order, and hanged himself. He died there and was buried in his family tomb. This last plan of Ahithophel is tragic, of trying to take matters into his own hands, take control of the moment in his own hands. He is not presented as a wicked man. Instead, his stature as a wise advisor is unparalleled. He may have wanted David to fall for understandable reasons, but he did not allow his rage to spill onto other people. We see this also as a mirror of what Judas does much later to Jesus. Judas didn't start out necessarily as a bad man. But in John 12, when witnessing Mary pouring oil or perfume over Jesus and anointing him before burial, his heart, because he was a thief of all of the money, because he held the money that belonged to the group, grew bitter. And he started to seek for ways to destroy Jesus. Both were close to the king. Both knew the ramifications of betraying the king. And once their plans failed, both tried to take matters into their own hands and hang themselves. Another thing from Instagram. There's a creator I've been following who has been pointing out some very interesting insights with different biblical characters. And one thing he points out about Judas Iscariot is our condition. Judas's betrayal was a one-time act, a turning away that sealed his fate. But ours is constant. We betray Christ in the quietest moments. Every time we sin consciously, it's as if we are hanging him back on the cross. We are more like Judas than we like to admit, and yet we are worse because we've forgotten the weight of the sacrifice, forgotten that the same mercy Judas rejected is still available to us. This is what Judas didn't know. Redemption isn't a one-time offer. Grace doesn't vanish when we betray. It calls us back. Judas hanged himself in despair, his body falling, bursting open. A final act of betrayal, and in the end, it was never about Judas. It was about the God who was betrayed. The God who never stops loving. The God who holds out grace no matter how far we fall. The question is, who do you choose? Your way or God's way? Grace or control? Final bit inside of 2 Samuel 17 is this. David soon arrived at Mahanaim. This is roughly where they crossed in the middle of the night. They travel another 20, 30 miles up to Mahanaim. Hushai bought them a lot of time. By now, Absalom had mobilized the entire army after they had reached Mahanaim. And he was leading them across the Jordan River. Absalom had appointed Amasa as the commander of his army, replacing Joab, who had been commander under David. Amasa was Joab's cousin. His father was Jether, an Ishmaelite. His mother, Abigail, daughter of Nahash, was the sister of Joab's mother, Zeruiah. Absalom and the Israelite army set up camp in the land of Gilead. And what we see is that Absalom has moved to a place of readiness for destruction and great amounts of stress, whereas David, in his stress, moves to a place of a refreshment. As he arrives at Mahanaim, he was warmly greeted by Shobai, son of Nahash, who was from Rabbah of the Ammonites, and Maker, son of Amiel from Lo-debar. This was the one who was formerly taking care of Mephibosheth. So as kindness was done to Mephibosheth, kindness is given to David here. And by Barzillai, the Gilead, of Gilead from Rogelim. They brought some sleeping mats, cooking pots, serving bowls, wheat and barley, flour and roasted grain, beans, lentils, honey, butter, sheep, goats, and cheese for David and those who were with him. For they said, "You must all be very hungry and tired and thirsty after your long march through the wilderness." So again, what do we see between the difference of David and Absalom's journey? David comes from a place of great stress to refreshment. He goes from trial to peace as God provides for him. Absalom, he goes from places of great victory and joy as he seeks his own desire. In the moment, it seems great, and he's sliding quickly down into danger. What are we going into? What are we in? And how are we leaving different stresses in our lives? What are you going through, and how are you handling it? Who are you trusting? Who has control? The difference between these two today, as an article talked about, is that some people, the article is trying to purport is some people are taking a break from listening to music. Generation Z is purporting that they are tired of listening to music because of the bombardment of suggestions, how the algorithms are giving them so much. And there are two different kinds of music listeners they talk about is that there are those that just follow the algorithm and quickly press skip until they find the ethereal best choice, versus the one that takes in whatever is played, as if on the radio you had no control of what comes on next. These two different kinds of approaches show how we also approach life equally. Some of us go into autopilot mode, just kind of skipping through different things in life, hoping for the best until we get to that moment where we feel so good and then everything dissipates. Versus the one who through trials and pain and joys and pleasures is able to enjoy how God has blessed us in a unique and rich way. God's sovereignty works like this in Psalm 93. The Lord is king, he is robed in majesty. Indeed, the Lord is robed in majesty and armed with strength. The world stands firm and cannot be shaken. Your throne, O Lord, has stood from time immemorial. You yourself are from everlasting past. The floods have risen up, O Lord. The floods have roared like thunder. The floods have lifted their pounding waves, but mightier than the violent raging of the seas, mightier than the breakers of the shore. The Lord above is mightier than these. Your royal laws cannot be changed. Your reign, O Lord, is holy forever and ever. This is where we learn to plan differently. I'll have the ushers as well as Todd come up. Instead of trying to swim upstream against the Lord, we're invited to participate in his plan. Even when things are toughest, we're called to wait and trust. It's hard to wait and trust when things are tough. Life is most difficult, and even when life is most comfortable, we're called not to lean in on our own understanding, but in all things to submit to him. So we can ask ourselves these questions. How do we do this? Why would we want to give up your own plans? Why would you want to give up your own plans? What makes God's plans better? What plans lead to refreshment and satisfaction? This kind of listing is important as we face each new day and each difficult and joyous moment. But ultimately, the only plan that matters is God's plan. We can come up with all sorts of things, all sorts of plans that make sense in life and situations, but they will always only get us so far. God's plan for us may not make sense in the moment, but as we trust him, he leads us best. He corrects us, he directs us, he protects us, and ultimately, he refreshes us. So my encouragement is I'd like to pray this prayer over you. Wherever you are in your walk with Jesus? Each morning we need to pray something like this. Mighty God, I am prone to going my own way and taking control. Please change my heart and mind to trust you and believe you. Give me faith to trust in your plan. Lead me as you are calling me. Help me to follow you, Jesus, and become more like you. In Jesus' name, amen.